Καλησπέρα σε όλους. Εκπρόσωποι του Υπουργείου Πολιτισμού και Αθλητισμού, αξιότιμε πρέσβη της Ελβετίας στην Ελλάδα, κύριε Πρόεδρε του Ιδρύματος της Ελβετικής Αρχαιολογικής Σχολής στην Ελλάδα, κυρίες και κύριοι φίλοι της Ελβετικής Σχολής, αγαπητοί συνεργάτες και φοιτητές. Θα ήθελα να σας καλωσορίσω στην ετήσια συνέλευση της Ελβετικής Αρχαιολογικής Σχολής. Είναι μεγάλη μου χαρά να σας παρουσιάσω το έργο της σχολής σε αυτή την πολύ όμορφη αίθουσα, η οποία μας παραχωρήθηκε την Αμερικάνικη Σχολή Κλασικών Σπουδών στην Αθήνα, με την οποία, πρέπει να πω, διατηρώ φιλική και ιδιαίτερη σχέση. Θα ήθελα να ευχαριστήσω τη Διευθύντρια, την κυρία Καθηγήτρια Μπόνα Westcoat, καθώς και το Γενικό Διευθυντή, τον κύριο Παναγιώτη Πάνο, και οι άνθρωποι πίσω στη τεχνική, ο Κωνσταντίνος Τζορτζίνης και η ομάδα του, για την τεχνική υποστήριξη που μας επιτρέπει να το βλέπουμε και στο YouTube για αυτοί που δεν είναι εδώ απόψε. Το 2024 συμπληρώνονται 60 χρόνια ελληνοελβετικών ανασκαφών στην Ερέτρια. Οι πρώτες ανασκαφές πραγματοποιήθηκαν ακριβώς πριν από 60 χρόνια, τον Απρίλιο του 1964, τον ίδιο μήνα. Πρόκειται για μια συμβολική ημερομηνία, στην οποία θα επανέλθω αργότερα, αποτείοντας ιδίως φόρο τιμής στους βασικούς συντελεστές αυτού του εγχειρήματος, τον Βασίλη Πετράκο, τον Ιωάννη Παπαδημητρίου, τη Λιλή Καΐλ και τον Κιάλ Σέφολντ. Αλλά ας προχωρήσουμε τώρα όμως με τις δραστηριότητες της σχολής και στην πρόοδο του προγράμματος. Όπως συμβαίνει συχνά στις εκδηλώσεις που διοργανώνει η Ελβετία, θα μπορέσετε να βελτιώσετε τις γλωσσικές σας δεξιότητες. Και η αρχαιολογία δεν αποτελεί εξαίρεση, οπότε θα αλλάξουμε λίγο γλώσσες. Εγώ αρχίζω στα ελληνικά, θα προχωρήσω μετά με τα γαλλικά και μετά το κύριο λόγο θα γίνει στα αγγλικά. Mesdames et messieurs, les représentants du ministère de la Culture, monsieur l'ambassadeur de Suisse en Grèce, monsieur le chef de mission adjoint de l'ambassade de Suisse en Grèce, monsieur le président de l'école suisse d'archéologie en Grèce, mesdames et messieurs les membres du conseil de fondation, mesdames et messieurs, chers collaborateurs, stagiaires, étudiants, chers amis de l'école qui nous suivez depuis la Suisse, de Genève et pourquoi pas Zurich aussi, je l'espère. Je vous souhaite la bienvenue à la conférence annuelle de l'école suisse d'archéologie. Nous voici réunis ce soir à Athènes pour partager ce qui forme le cœur de nos activités, la recherche archéologique suisse en Grèce. Comme je le disais à l'instant en grec, c'est une année particulière pour nous car l'année 2024 marque les 60 ans des fouilles gréco-suisses à Eretrie. En effet, les premiers coups de pioche furent donnés il y a précisément 60 ans, en avril 1964, presque jour pour jour. C'est une date symbolique sur laquelle j'aurai l'occasion de revenir en images dans quelques instants. Alors cette conférence se déclinera en 4 parties, en anglais, afin de toucher un public plus élargi. Un premier rapport d'activité par le directeur. Ensuite, Madame Angeliki Simosi nous parlera des travaux qu'elle mène en collaboration avec nous, notamment à Antikythera, suivi de Tamara Saggini qui nous livrera un rapport sur les fouilles conduites à l'intérieur du sanctuaire à Amarinthos, en collaboration toujours avec l'Ephorie de B. Enfin, M. Tobias Krapf nous donnera un rapport sur le projet à Aigina, en collaboration avec l'Ephorie du Pirée et des îles. Alors, la 4e partie, c'est la plus importante. C'est un apéritif dînatoire qui sera gracieusement offert par notre ambassade et qui nous permettra d'échanger avec un verre de vin à la main et de socialiser dans ces magnifiques jardins de l'école américaine qui nous reçoit ce soir. Mais avant de débuter la conférence, je vais céder la parole à M. Marc Bruchet, qui est chef de mission adjoint à l'ambassade de Suisse à Athènes.
Dear President of the Board of Trustees of the Swiss School of Archaeology in Greece, Mr. Pascal Broulis, dear Director of the school, Mr. Fachard, dear representative of the Greek authorities, dear guests from Switzerland, dear friends of Greece, ladies and gentlemen. Καλώς σας ήρθατε σε όλους. Όταν δεν μιλάω ελληνικά καλά, συνεχίσω και θα κάνω ομιλία μου στην αγγλικά. Ευχαριστώ. Tonight, it's a great honor for me to welcome you on behalf of the Embassy of Switzerland in Greece for the annual meeting of the Swiss School of Archaeology in Greece. Archaeology is an inseparable part of the very privileged relations that exist between Switzerland and Greece. Since 60 years, the school is a pillar of our bilateral relationship. It is the perfect example of science and culture diplomacy put at the service of the understanding of our common history. It is the continuation of a long tradition of Philhellenism, where Switzerland played an important role during the last 200 years and still continue to play. You, archaeologists, you are the modern Philhellenes, heirs of personalities like Jean-Gabriel Hénard or Johann Jacob Meyer, as well as ambassadors of Swiss science diplomacy. During the past year 2023, the Swiss School continued its work on the island of Evia, Aigina, as well as of the island of Antikythera, where the third research took place last June with some interesting discoveries. But I'm sure Professor Fachard will elaborate on this further on. Then I would like to finalize to thank the Greek authorities for their support, and in particular the Ministry for Culture for their support also, and to congratulate the Swiss School for its wonderful work. Thank you very much, and καλό βράδυ.
Un grand merci, cher Marc. As I said in my bilingual introduction before, 2024 marks 60 years of Greek-Swiss excavations in Eretria. In fact, the first excavation was conducted in April 1964, exactly 60 years ago this very month. Now, there's no time tonight, unfortunately, to tell the story of this archaeological enterprise, but I will highlight some of the main actions that made this journey possible. In a recent publication, former Swiss School director Pierre Ducret paid tribute to the significant role played by Vasilis Petrakos in the development of the Greco-Swiss excavations in Eretria. In the Archeologikon Deltion of 1962, Petrakos, then epimelete in Eretria from 1961 to 1963, wrote the following lines. You can see them in Greek. I'm going to translate them in English. Full quote. Eretria, preserved for the most part until the beginning of our century, has almost disappeared, or at least most of it. Real estate pressure is increasing at an exponential rate, and it's only thanks to the continued vigilance of the Archaeological Service that the last remains are preserved. The disappearance of the ancient city is due to the lack of attention paid by its inhabitants to the construction of new buildings and roads, as well as agricultural activities. As a result, today, only the ancient monuments located in public spaces have been preserved, while the remains situated in private plots have been almost entirely destroyed. Another reason for the disappearance of the ancient city is the lack of publications of the excavations and their results, as well as the inadequacies of the archaeological plan. The old map drawn up by Bavarian topographers in 1834 is very incomplete and, what's more, partially erroneous as far as archaeological remains are concerned. End of quote. Now, while Petrakos was active in Eretria, Lili Kail, one of the founders of the LIMC, was professor of classical archaeology at the University of Fribourg in Switzerland. She was then collaborating on the Brauron excavations, directed by Ioannis Papadimitriou, the general director of antiquities. In 1961, Professor Karl Sheffold invited Papadimitriou to give a lecture at the University of Basel. Papadimitriou asked Sheffold if the Swiss universities would start an excavation in Greece. The site of Eretria, I quote, is threatened. It would be the occasion for Swiss archaeologists to contribute to its rescue. End of quote. The Greek Ministry of Culture approved the project in 1962. However, the sudden death of the late Papadimitriou delayed its implementation. But in April 1964, Swiss archaeologists started excavating at Eretria, in an area north of the museum that had been saved and cleaned by Vasilis Petrakos, the so-called West Quarter. The excavations later uncovered several classical Hellenistic houses, as well as the well-known Heron necropolis. After 60 years, the school has published 25 volumes in the Eretria series and hundreds of articles. And from an archaeological point of view, Eretria stands as one of the best studied ancient Greek cities. As the school continues its mission and publications effort in Eretria, it has redirected its attention to another, I may say, rescue mission, which is the sanctuary of Artemis at Amarinthos. After a decade of excavation, the Swiss-Greek project has uncovered the most significant religious space currently known in Nevia. A large courtyard of over 5,000 square meters occupied by porticos, treasuries, and a main temple, characterized by a succession of several architectural phases stretching from the geometric to the imperial period. Particularly impressive was a few years ago the discovery of a votive deposit within the temple, which included over 700 objects in a remarkable state of preservation. Now, the possibility of excavating Euboea's largest shrine in the 21st century, applying cutting-edge excavation techniques, is in fact an extraordinary opportunity for recording the archaeological signature of a Greek cult, ancient sacrifice, the gestures, the beliefs of Dedicans, as well as the identity of the worshipped deity. As you will see in the later report by Tamara, the first temple, dating from the late 8th century BCE, is 32 meters long and close to 9 meters wide, and it may correspond to the symbolic dimension of 100 feet, ekaton pedon. The temple is built on top of an earlier building, which we may date to the late Bronze Age, but whose layout remains incomplete. This first apsidal temple remained in use for approximately 150 years, before being partially destroyed by fire between the middle and third quarters of the 6th century BCE, when it was replaced by a new rectangular building measuring 39 by 11 meters. Now, the discovery and exploration of the Artemision were the subject of a new documentary called Artemis, le Temple perdu, Artemis, the Lost Temple, which came out at the end of 2023. Aired in French and German on Swiss TV and then Arte, and soon to be translated in Italian and modern Greek next month, the film marks a significant milestone in the history of research and especially the rediscovery of the shrine. Now, so far, the film has recorded 700,000 views on Arte's YouTube channel. And I'm also happy to announce that the film has been shortlisted at the 12th International Archaeological Duck Fest, Agon, in Athens, and will be projected on a big screen on Friday, May 24 at 8 o'clock, save the date. But now, it's a teaser, just let me play the trailer.
Le sanctuaire d'Artémis d'Amarinthos est longtemps resté l'une des dernières grandes énigmes archéologiques de l'Antiquité grecque.
Depuis 50 ans, des archéologues suisses fouillent à l'île d'Eubée, à 2 heures de route d'Athènes, et la persévérance a fini par payer.
C'est fait, ils ont enfin trouvé le sanctuaire d'Artémis, et c'est la preuve que pas loin, sous des tonnes de terre, le temple lui-même et la statue de la déesse attendent d'être mises au jour.
D'abord menée en solitaire dans les années 60 par un jeune archéologue neuchâtelois, Denis Knopfler, cette quête va devenir, 40 ans plus tard, une large entreprise collective qui réunira des équipes suisses et grecques.
Il y a eu des moments de grand désespoir. On était certain que le sanctuaire se trouvait ici dans les parages. Et pendant 2 ans de prospection, on n'a trouvé aucun vestige antique en surface. Il n'y avait rien.
De la découverte des premiers vestiges au tournant des années 2000, jusqu'à l'identification formelle du sanctuaire en 2017, cette formidable odyssée constitue l'une des plus spectaculaires découvertes archéologiques faites en Grèce depuis 30 ans.
Dans ce sanctuaire, il y a 1000 ans d'histoire grecque qui sont figées là, à travers les vestiges archéologiques et à travers les inscriptions.
Now, I'm sure you would prefer to watch the movie instead of listening to me, but we'll continue with the program. Let me just say that you can actually, Arte opened it again, so there's a free access this month in Greece and Europe and elsewhere in the world. And if you scan it, thank you, Konstantinos, he just did the trick a few minutes ago. If you scan it, you have direct access to the documentary on Arte. So while the discovery of the Artemision might seem obvious today, it remained a very distant prospect until the early 2000s. Now today, the Swiss School starts a new chapter in analyzing, publishing, and communicating the finds from the Artemision. Although conservation and study usually remain unknown to the public, and they rarely constitute the focus of a film, they are nonetheless critical and necessitate significant effort and resources. From a long-term perspective, the school's mission at Amarinthos is probably only just beginning. We aim to establish a strong foundation in scientific research, logistics, cultural heritage, and scientific diplomacy. Our mission also faces significant challenges. The Eretrian Museum has reached its maximum storage capacity and now requires an extension. The plans for this extension have already been submitted to the Ministry of Culture. Work is planned to begin in 2024 on a plot of land that was generously donated by the Municipal Council of Eretria. Of course, significant resources might be invested in order to complete the extension. And as you know, Switzerland is a poor country, so the school relies on the generosity of private donors. I made my pitch. Additionally, approximately 700 objects discovered in the temple must be restored and studied. The analysis of the discoveries and the architecture of the ancient temples will feature in scientific monographs as part of a new series, the Amarinthos series. And the first volume, scheduled to be released in 2024, is based on Denis Knöffler's study of a decree from the polis of Eretria concerning military officials and displayed in the sanctuary of Amarinthos. Consequently, we will pause fieldwork in the Artemision to set aside time for studying and publishing the material. Nevertheless, work in Amarinthos will not cease entirely. Modern houses will be removed to create space and liberate the ancient remains. Some areas of the site will be cleaned, filled in, and protected to ensure that the site visits can be conducted safely. Finally, the archaeological survey project, which explores how the sanctuary was integrated within the ancient landscape, the plain and the valley, will be extended. All this, of course, would be impossible without the help and the active collaboration of the Greek Ministry of Culture. So I take this opportunity to thank the Greek archaeological authorities who have granted the necessary authorizations and with whom we enjoy a fruitful and friendly collaboration year after year. Now, in particular, our gratitude goes to the Minister of Culture, Dr. Lina Mendoni, the current Director of the Efforate of Antiquities of Evia, Mr. Dimitris Christodoulou, as well as Olga Kyriadzi, responsible for Eretria and Amarinthos. The Efforate of Underwater Antiquities, Dr. Eleni Banu, the former Efforate of the Efforate of Antiquities of Piraeus and Islands, Dr. Stella Chrysoulaki, as well as Sofia Michalopoulou, the former Efforate, Dr. Angeliki Simosi, and co-director of the Amarinthos and Antikythera excavations, Dr. Polixeni Adamveleni, head of the Directorate of Antiquities of the Greek Ministry of Culture and Sports, as well as Konstantina Benisi and Sofia Spiropoulou of the Department of Foreign Schools. Our thanks also go to the collaborators of the Evia Efforate, in particular Fani Stravoulaki and Stavroula Parisi. Moreover, the school's activities in Eretria and Amarinthos are conducted in close cooperation with the local authorities and association, and our gratitude goes in particular to the mayor of Eretria, Mr. Nikolaos Hornis, and the vice mayor, Mr. Katevas, who is here tonight. We want to express our gratitude to the Swiss National Science Foundation, the Swiss Federal Department of Economic Affairs, Education and Research, the State Secretary for Education, Research and Innovation, the Swiss universities, and the Sando Femme Philanthropic Foundation. Our thanks also go especially to the University of Lausanne, which provides ideal conditions for our activities. In Greece, I would like to thank the Stavros Niarchos Foundation for its great generosity through a grant supporting 4 SNF scholarships at the Artemision of Amarinthos in restoration, digital technologies, and outreach. Simply put, work and research would be impossible without their help. I would also like to express our appreciation to the younger generations who have recently joined our projects. Over the course of a decade, the Swiss School has trained some 300 students from Switzerland, Greece, France, and other countries who participated in the excavations at Amarinthos. This has been an extraordinary opportunity, as the school has never before welcomed such a large number of young archaeologists in Greece. Although excavations at Amarinthos will be halted, the Swiss School will continue to offer internships to students for Swiss universities as part of the school's enduring mission. Last but not least, I would like to express my deep gratitude to all the school collaborators, in particular Thierry Toria and Tobias Krapf, who are the scientific secretaries in Switzerland and Greece, Daphne Vlandi, Administrator, Sylvie Fournier, Media Communication Officer, Kostas Evangeliou, our General Manager in Eretria, and Hari Yannolopoulos and Galatia Konsolidi, Chief Conservators at the Eretrian Museum. I would also like to extend my warmest thanks to our Board of Trustees. You can see them on the right. Governance, as you know, is not an easy matter, and I could obviously not conduct my tasks without their active collaboration. As the famous quote goes, we cannot be consumers of good governments, we must be participants. This is why I strongly believe in sinergasias, collaborations, and I hope they will find a way to increase their numbers in the future, always within the number of 6 permits allocated to each foreign schools and institutes. We have now reached the second part of this presentation, dedicated to the more detailed archaeological reports at Antikythera, in Evia, Amarinthos, and Aegina. So we will start now with the underwater excavations at the Antikythera shipwreck, a collaboration between the Ministry of Culture and the Swiss School under the direction of Angeliki Simosi and Professor Lorenz Baumer from the University of Geneva. And I'm now very happy to invite Kyria Angeliki Simosi to the stage to talk about her work in our collaboration. Angeliki.
Αγαπητοί φίλοι και φίλες, εκλεκτοί προσκεκλημένοι, καλησπέρα σας. Οι ελληνοελβετικές έρευνες αποτελούν σήμερα ένα σταθμό στα αρχαιολογικά δρόμενα της χώρας μας, αλλά και σε διεθνή κλίμακα. Η μεγάλη αρχαιολογική ανακάλυψη το 2017 του ιερού της Αρτέμιδος στην Αμάρινθο μας εκπλήσει κάθε ανασκαφική περίοδο με νέα δεδομένα, αφού έρχεται στο φως σταδιακά ένα χαμένο ιερό αφιερωμένο στην πιο λατρεμένη θεά της Εύβοιας, στην Άρτεμη. 700 περίπου αντικείμενα, αφιερώματα των πιστών στην αγαπημένη τους θεά, βρέθηκαν στον αρχαϊκό αποθέτη του ναού, μαρτυρώντας τη δύναμη της λατρείας προς την Άρτεμη και μαζί τους ο τόπος λατρείας της, ένα κτίριο μήκους 35 μέτρων, ένας εκατόμπεδος ναός, ενισχύει και επιβεβαιώνει την ύπαρξη του Αρτεμισίου της Αμαρίνθου, μια τοποθεσία κλειδί για τη μελέτη της εξέλιξης της θρησκευτικής αρχιτεκτονικής και λατρείας στην αρχαία Ελλάδα. 3 διαδοχικοί ναοί, ο ένας πάνω στον άλλον, με τους αντίστοιχους βωμούς τους, μας μεταφέρουν αιώνες πριν, με τον παλιότερο να χρονολογείται τον 8ο αιώνα π.Χ., πιθανόν και λίγο νωρίτερα, και τους 2 μεταγενέστερους στα μέσα και στο τέλος του 6ου αιώνα π.Χ. Και όπως περήφανα δηλώνει ο επιστημονικός συνεργάτης της Ελβετικής Αρχαιολογικής Σχολής, αρχαιολόγος Tobias Krapf, η ανασκαφή του Αρτεμισίου της Αμαρίνθου συμπεριλαμβάνεται μεταξύ των μεγαλύτερων πανεπιστημιακών ερευνητικών ανασκαφών στην Ελλάδα. Το χρονικό της μεγάλης αυτής ανακάλυψης του Αρτεμισίου αποτυπώθηκε πρόσφατα στο ντοκιμαντέρ Artemis, ο χαμένος ναός, με διεθνή προβολή από τα κανάλια RTS και Arte, με στόχο και σκοπό τη διάχυση της πληροφορίας στο ευρύ κοινό. Ταυτόχρονα με την ανασκαφική έρευνα στο Αρτεμίσιο συνεχίζεται και διευρύνεται το μεγαλόπονο πρόγραμμα επιφανειακής έρευνας στην κοιλάδα του Σαρανταπόταμου, περιοχή που ανήκει στην αρχαία επικράτεια της Ερέτριας. Ένα ακόμα επίτευγμα είναι η εκπόνηση μιας πλήρους μελέτης που πρόκειται σύντομα να κατατεθεί προς έγκριση στις αρμόδιες υπηρεσίες του Υπουργείου Πολιτισμού για την επέκταση του τόσο σημαντικού αρχαιολογικού μουσείου της Ερέτριας τόσο στους εκθεσιακούς όσο και στους αποθηκευτικούς χώρους του, αλλά και στους χώρους συντήρησης, ώστε να εκθεθούν και να αποθηκευτούν τα σημαντικά ευρήματα των νεότερων αρχαιολογικών ερευνών σε Ερέτρια και Αμάρινθο. Φεύγοντας από την Εύβοια, κατευθυνόμαστε στα μακρινά Αντικύθυρα, γνωστά εκτός των άλλων και από το περίφημο αρχαίο ναυάγιο. Από την ανακάλυψή του το 1900 από σημειακούς φουγκαράδες μέχρι και σήμερα δεν πάβει να μας εκπλήσει. Μετά τις έρευνες του Κουστό το 1976 στο θαλάσσιο χώρο του ναυαγίου, η εφορία εναλίων αρχαιοτήτων του Υπουργείου Πολιτισμού ξεκίνησε από το 2012 συστηματικά να επιχειρεί στο χώρο του ναυαγίου με ένα φιλόδοξο για την εποχή πρόγραμμα με τίτλο «Επιστροφή στα Αντικύθυρα». Ένα πλήθος νέων κινητών ευρημάτων ήρθα στον φως κατά τη διάρκεια των ετών, τα οποία αφού συντηρήθηκαν στα εξειδικευμένα εργαστήρια της εφορίας εναλίων αρχαιοτήτων, τα σημαντικότερα εξ αυτών έχουν παρουσιαστεί κατά καιρούς σε περιοδικές εκθέσεις στο Ίδρυμα Εκατερίνης Λασκαρίδη στον Πειραιά. Και οι έρευνες συνεχίζονται μέχρι σήμερα σε συνεργασία με την Ελβετική Αρχαιολογική Σχολή στην Ελλάδα, εκπροσωπούμενη από τον καθηγητή αρχαιολογίας του Πανεπιστημίου της Γενέβης, δόκτορα Λόρεντς Μπάουμερ, στο πλαίσιο ενός 5ετούς ερευνητικού προγράμματος που έχει διάρκεια από το 2021 έως το 2025. Ανεξάντλητα είναι ακόμα τα αντικείμενα στο βυθό. Μικρά θράψματα γλυπτών και κομμάτια αμφορέων ανελκύστηκαν από το βυθό κατά την έρευνα του 2023 και το κυριότερο, κατορθώσαμε για πρώτη φορά σε ένα σκαφί ναυαγίου και μάλιστα σε μεγάλο βάθος έως και 45 μέτρα να διεξαχθεί η στρωματογραφική διασκόπηση του αρχαίου πλοίου από την επιφάνεια του πυθμένα και σε βάθος όπου ανασκαφικά συναντάται το ξύλινο σκαρί του. Ο θαλάσσιος χώρος της βύθισης του πλοίου είναι αρκετά εκτεταμένος, σε μεγάλο βάθος που ξεκινά από τα 45 μέτρα και η κατοφερής μορφολογία του βυθού είναι σχεδόν αποτρεπτική για τη στρωματογραφική απεικόνιση της κατάστασης του ναυαγίου. Όμως, μετά την ανέλκυση δύο σημαντικών ευρημάτων κατά την έρευνα του 2022, ύστερα από τη δύσκολη εργασία της μετακίνησης τεράστιων βράχων, και βλέπετε εδώ το ένα από τα ευρήματα είναι μία μαρμάρινη κεφαλή, πιθανόν να είναι Ηρακλή ή και Διόνυσου, και μίας επιτύβιας στήλης στο ανατολικό τμήμα του ναυαγίου. Αποφασίστηκε στην κομβική αυτή περιοχή να γίνει μία ανασκαφική τομή 2x2. Φανταστείτε τα αυτά στα 45 μέτρα. Φαίνεται λοιπόν ότι μέσα σε ένα παχύ στρώμα συσσωμάτωσης που στην ορολογία λέγεται concretion, περικλείονται, σώζονται πολλά ακόμα αντικείμενα, όπως τμήματα πύληνων και γυάλινων αγκίων, πολλά καρφιά επενδυμένα με ξύλο από το πέτσωμα του πλοίου, αλλά και το σημαντικότερο όλων, ανθρώπινα οστά από τους ναυαγούς. Ακόμα βρέθηκαν και 2 δόντια από αυτούς. Παράλληλα, κάποια μικρά κομμάτια γλυπτών ήρθαν στο φως, όπως ένα κομμάτι από κόμη ή από γενεάδα, και άλλα προς το παρόν αδιάγνωστα. Η μεγάλη επιτυχία της έρευνας αυτής οφείλεται στο γεγονός ότι αποκαλύφθηκε αυτό το πολύ συμπαγές στρώμα εν είδη τσιμέντου, αυτό το κοκρέσιον που είπαμε, εντός το οποίο περικλείονται όλα τα προαναφερθέντα κινητά ευρήματα πριν ακόμα φτάσουμε στο σκαρί του πλοίου. Και είναι η πρώτη φορά που γίνεται μια τέτοια στρωματογραφική διερεύνηση σε τέτοιο βάθος και σε ανασκαφή ναυαγίου. Η αρχαιολογική έρευνα συμπληρώθηκε με την εφαρμογή της ψηφιακής και της τρισδιάστατης αποτύπωσης και επιπροσθέτως πάνω στο νησί έχει εγκατασταθεί ένα εργαστήριο αναλύσεων πεδίου για μικρομορφολογικές επιτόπιες παρατηρήσεις, ώστε να διευκολύνεται η πορεία της έρευνας. Καταλήγοντας, φτάνουμε στο νησί της Αίγινας και μεταφερόμαστε στο Ελλάνιο Όρος, όπου στην ψηλότερη κορφή του υπάρχει ναός αφιερωμένος στη λατρεία του Δία. Όμως οι νέες αρχαιολογικές έρευνες έφεραν στο φως κατάλοιπα κατοίκησης μικηναϊκών χρόνων καθώς και οχυρωματικού περιβόλου της ίδιας εποχής. Η ανακάλυψη αυτή είναι υψής της σημασίας γιατί διαπιστώνεται η κατοίκηση της περιοχής για ένα διάστημα σχεδόν 4 χιλιετιών και συμπληρώνει τους αρχαιολογικούς χώρους της Αίγινας που όλοι τους ξέρετε είναι ο ναός του Απόλλωνα στην Κολώνα, ο ναός της Αφέας, η Παλαιόχώρα και τώρα το Ελλάνιο Όρος. Από σήμερα ανοίγεται ένα νέο κεφάλαιο στη συνεργασία μας και Έλληνες και Ελβετοί αρχαιολόγοι θα προχωρήσουμε στο στάδιο της μελέτης των ευρημάτων των συνεργατικών ερευνών μας, αρχής γενομένης από τα ευρήματα της Αμαρίνθου. Από τη θέση αυτή θέλω να ευχαριστήσω τους λαμπρούς συνεργάτες, το Διευθυντή της Ελβετικής Αρχαιολογικής Σχολής, δόκτορα Sylvian Fachard, που η συνεργασία μαζί του αυτά τα χρόνια είναι τόσο γόνιμη. Για την έρευνα της Αμαρίνθου, την επόπτρια από ελληνικής πλευράς αρχαιολόγο της Εφορίας Αρχαιοτήτων Ευβίας, Όλγα Κυριαζή, και τους στενούς συνεργάτες μου Φάλια Κίτσου και Σωτήρη Φαντή. Τον εξαίρετο συνάδελφο αρχαιολόγο και επιστήμονα συνεργάτη της Ελβετικής Αρχαιολογικής Σχολής Tobias Krapf και την κυρία Tamara Saggini που ουσιαστικά είναι αυτή που ανασκάπτει στην Αμάρινθο. Την αρχαιολόγο και συνεργάτη μου από την Εφορία Πειραιώς και Νήσων, υπεύθυνη για την έρευνα στο Ελλάνιο Όρος, τη ματάρχη Σοφία Μιχαλοπούλου και τον ερευνητή και τον εμπειρότατο τεχνικό βυθού στην έρευνα των Αντικυθήρων, τον κύριο Αλέξανδρο Σωτηρίου και μαζί την καταδιόμενη αρχιτέκτονα κυρία Εκατερίνη Ταγωνίδου που είναι χρόνια συνεργάτης μου στα 35 χρόνια που δούλεψα στην Εφορία Εναλίων Αρχαιοτήτων. Ευχαριστώ όλους εσάς που βρίσκεστε αυτή τη στιγμή εδώ και γιορτάζετε μαζί μας τα 60 χρόνια ερευνών της Ελβετικής Αρχαιολογικής Σχολής σε συνεργασία με την Ελληνική Αρχαιολογική Υπηρεσία. Σας ευχαριστώ πολύ.
The school's main project in 2023 focused on the Artemision and Amarinthos, combining excavation, archaeological, field survey, and geoarchaeology. Now, Tamara Saggini and Tobias will present later on the excavations of the sanctuary, and I will speak now about the report on the survey component of the project, which I co-direct. So the third field season of the Eretrian and Amarinthos survey project continued the archaeological exploration of the study region. The project involves intensive and extensive pedestrian survey, LiDAR-based remote sensing, architectural documentation, and geomorphological mapping. Additionally, a significant geoarchaeological component was incorporated in 2023 to improve our understanding of erosion and alluvial dynamics, and this, of course, should help us to analyze the observed ceramic densities on the surface and identify the areas best suited for long-term settlement and agriculture. Since 2021, we have systematically surveyed an area of 22 square kilometers, uncovering nearly 200 archaeological features from all periods and counting over 100,000 pottery and tile fragments on the surface. Now, despite the challenges posed by the extensive development of modern urbanization in the area, the survey has been able to map broad patterns of ceramic distribution and long-term human occupation across the entire landscape from the Neolithic to the Ottoman and early modern period. Although it remains premature to draw conclusions, general trends in the occupational history of the region can be drawn based on a systematic review of the surface pottery of the 2021-23 season, which was done a few weeks ago. So following a very discrete presence in the geometric and early archaic periods outside Eretria, only 3 sites are known, we record an incremental occupation of the plain at the very end of the late Archaic period, with 23 survey units and sites. The distribution of the pottery shows a concentration in the areas of Liani Amos, Magula, and Aios Dimitrios, along the coastal road leading from Eretria to the Artemision. You can see the area here in the middle. Diagnostic sherds are few but sufficient enough to show that several of the later classical settlements were occupied by the end of the 6th century BCE and early 5th century, thus confirming the presence of Choria villages outside Eretria during the Persian siege of Eretria of 490 BCE, as recorded by Herodotus. The peak of occupation was reached in the classical period, unsurprisingly. Diagnostic classical pottery is found in over 100 survey units and sites, displaying several distribution patterns. Overall, we can tentatively recreate 6 to 8 settlements between Eretria and Amarinthos in the classical period, which we interpret as ancient demes. This demonstrates a vibrant occupation in the region outside the urban pole of Eretria, with settlement densities spreading over a large area along the main communication axis and roads. These first results weaken, I think, the dichotomy between the city and its countryside, and promote instead the vision of a more complex urban-rural continuum, a notion that I have been developing in my recent work. In the Hellenistic period, the level of occupation appears to drop from 100 survey units to 20 survey units with pottery, especially in the last 2 centuries BCE. This decrease is visible both inside and outside the demes, prompting us to hypothesize a partial abandonment of the Eretrian Amarinthos countryside in the Hellenistic period. Now, such drops in occupation in the Hellenistic period have been recorded, of course, in other surveys in Greece, but the case of our survey here is, if confirmed, appears to be particularly telling. On the other hand, we record a stabilization and slight increase in occupation during the Roman imperial period, the 1st century to the 4th century CE, with diagnostic pottery found in 52 survey units and sites. In the late Roman period, we observe a substantial increase in occupation and rural exploitation, with diagnostic pottery found in 45 survey units and sites, more than we have in the first 4 centuries CE combined. New single sites appear in the countryside, and several classical deme sites are occupied or reoccupied after centuries. In the Byzantine period, we observe a paradigm shift in habitation and exploitation. First, Eretria appears to be abandoned, or at least seriously depopulated to an unprecedented level in over 2 millennia of occupation. Second, several Byzantine sites are distributed along the Eretria-Gimnu axis, which continues to bear significance as a communication route. And you can see here a settlement of Aios Astomathon with an unknown church that has been discovered in the survey this summer. We also note a concentration of occupation in the eastern part of the Sarandapos Valley, with sites at Spalioklysias, the area of Anovathia, and further up in the mountains. In which you compare with what we had before, you can see that the entire area of Eretria is abandoned at that time. This pattern fully expands in the late Byzantine, early Ottoman period, and we have 44 survey units and sites for this period. We see insignificant settlements for the first time to appear up in the mountains in the areas of Kotroni, Gimnu, and Novathia, with the churches of Metamorphosis, Zoodokos, Pigi, Aios, Yorgos, and Theotokos. Although the archaeological data is still incomplete, it matches with the Ottoman tax record of 1474 that mentions the town of Vathia, and the villages of Gimnos and Mamula. In the Ottoman and early modern period, we note a decrease in occupation, now mainly concentrated in the areas of Gimnu and Anovathia. So after 3 survey seasons, the occupational history of the Eretria-Amarinthos region can already be studied with a new epistemological framework and a research-driven base. The results of the survey provide topographical details that are often lacking in the study of Kora sanctuaries. Indeed, even before the location of the sanctuary of Artemis, scholars had emphasized the liminal character of the sanctuary, situated at the extremity of the Eretrian plain. According to a structuralist opposition model, the Artemision, situated at the edge of the cultivated plain, would be a borderline, a liminal position in relation to the urban pole formed by Eretria. You can see the sanctuary in Eretria here. However, the analysis of the settlement pattern and road network in the classical and Hellenistic periods show the dichotomy between an urban hub and a remote that the dichotomy between the urban hub and a remote rural world oversimplifies a far more complex reality. The distribution of settlements is more diffuse, spreading out along the roads that radiate out from Eretria to reach the many demes in the plain and valley. These demes are not all nucleated, but occupy extensive areas, which helps to draw a new image of rural settlement, formed broad halos of occupation and exploitation. You can also see that the sanctuary is not at a dead-end street. It's situated perfectly on the main Euboean highway linking Chalkis to Charistos. So the main road just goes by the sanctuary of Artemis. And I will come back to this point. In the 4th century BCE, when the Eretrian territory reached its maximum extension, which is 1,400 square kilometers, the Eretrian plain formed only one of the 5 districts, called koroi, of the territory. Now, when we extend the spatial analysis to the entire territory with the road network, we understand that several roads converge to the Artemision, which gradually acquires a central position both within the road network and the Chora. Now, of course, the formation of the Eretrian polis is characterized by a long and complex process, which still largely eludes us. The formation of the territory began in the 8th century BCE and crystallized at the end of the 5th century. Now, during this process, the sanctuary of Amarinthos established itself, or was chosen, as the polis's religious center, becoming the gathering place for the inhabitants of the 5 districts. Every year, during the festival of the Artemisia, the sanctuary was the common point of reference for the entire population. The territory's political integrity seems to have been placed under the protection of the goddess and her sanctuary. The centrality of Amarinthos in Eretria's political and religious space can also be seen, I think, in the sacred law of the Artemisia, dating from the second half of the 4th century BCE. Drafted after years of stasis, civil strife with internal and external turmoil that threatened the city's very existence, the new law reorganized the procession, Pompi, of Amarinthos, which included the participation of the inhabitants of the 5 koroi, the 5 districts of the territory. In this text, Artemis is celebrated as Phylaki, savior, but also as Metaxi, the mediator, in the middle, at the center of the various groups, identities, and geographical entities that were an integral part of the Eretrian polis. I believe this religious and civic centrality can also be perceived in the sanctuary's position within the Eretrian communication network, as the Artemision progressively became a thoroughfare at the core of all these itineraries, connectivities, and human courses. Thank you. So after describing the position of the shrine within the territory, we'll now focus on the temenos itself, and I'm very happy to invite Tamara Saggini to come and report on the excavations of this summer. Tamara.
So, good evening, everyone. Many thanks to the American School for hosting us again tonight. It's not the first time. Many of you have heard already about Amarinthos. So I will now present the results of the 2023 excavation season at the sanctuary of Amarinthos. And I guess the site is familiar to most of you by now, but we have a few new things to report. The excavation is, of course, a result of a teamwork, and I wish to start by thanking on my turn. First, the F48 of Antiquities of Euboea for a great collaboration, as always. The project directors, Sylvian Fachard and Angeliki Simosi, for their trust into leading this project. The research directors, Thierry Toria and Samuel Verdon. My co-field director colleague, Tobias Krapf, for a new successful excavation season. The field assistant, Jérôme André. Our administrative secretary, Daphne Vlanti. The activity managers on site and the flotation responsible, Alexia Eliadou. The find managers, Christina Pagoni, the head conservators, Charis Yanoulopoulos, and the whole conservation team, and all the trench supervisors and the students who participated last year, as well as the museum team and especially Stavroula Parisi. In 2023, work took place in 3 different places, in 3 different sectors as the previous years, as you can see on the slide, and I will present now the result of the 2 first, so the east sector and the temple sector, while Tobias Krapf will focus later on the prehistoric site. So the goals of the east sector were, on the one hand, to explore the links between the Propylea, building 3, and the north part of the sanctuary, and on the other hand, to investigate the earlier occupation of the site. In the northern part of the sector, a north stoa is attested and exists since the Archaic period, and it's closely linked to the building 3, so the Propylea that you can see on the plan, and has probably an earlier phase already. And in the southern part of the sector, we discovered a new building with an apsidial plan, which is dating back to the geometric period. It's laying right below the archaic Propylea building, and this is a very important discovery because now we can attest the geometric occupation within the site in Amarinthos in many different places. The nature of this occupation is, however, still to be defined. So in this sector, 2 major conclusions could be reached. On the one hand, the widespread occupation in the geometric period, and on the other hand, the monumentalization of the sanctuary in the archaic period. Let's turn now to the temple. As Sylvian said before, the acquisition of a new plot was a crucial change for the last excavation. It allowed us to explore the western part of the temple, and not only to complete its plan, but also to excavate the whole internal part of different buildings. So it's without a doubt a milestone in the exploration of the sanctuary, as you will see. And among the first most important milestone, 2 dates need to be remembered: the discovery of the first block in 2007 by Denis Knopfler and Sylvian Fachard, and the discovery of the first inscription in 2017 during the excavation led by Karl Reber, attesting the name of the deity to which the sanctuary was dedicated. So I think it's safe to say that a few years ago, no one expected to excavate a temple so well preserved, going back at least to the geometric period. In fact, the identification of the temple in 2020 changed the excavation strategy and led to a focus on an extensive exploration of this area. I mark now in green one of the altars as a help to witness the changes throughout the years. So you can see the changes in 2021, 22, and now 2023. So massive changes during the 3 successive years and many different surprises. So let's start now with the oldest remains that Sylvian already evoked earlier. At the end of the campaign in August 2023, we were assuming that the oldest building, which is the one in blue here, building 15, was dating back to the geometric period. But after our last pottery study season, a few weeks ago, from the beginning of April until last week, it has changed a little bit. It seems that in all the lowest level we reached, most likely linked to the building 15, the pottery dates back to the LH3C. During this campaign, we reviewed thousands of excavation units coming from all trenches we made within the temple. We registered almost 4,000 lines of category, shapes, and techniques, and catalogued almost 1,000 vases. The building 15 is uncovered so far over 16 meters on 7 and characterized by a plan made of 2 front walls and 1 partition wall in the center, while the western part is still unknown. It is possibly linked to 2 structures, one in front of the building and immediately underneath the geometric archaic altar, and one inside, which seems to be a hearth or an altar, according to the layers excavated around. The layers around contain ashes, charred bones, charcoal, and lime, and a few offerings, something we were already able to excavate around the other altars. And the analysis of the micromorphological sample by the Wiener Lab will help us to understand their formation process without a doubt. And I take here this opportunity to thank Takis, Dimitris, and Mirsini for collaborating and visiting us again to sample the whole site. Here you can see a few significant Mycenaean finds which were discovered in front of building 15, but a bit higher in the layers, in the geometric layers. And in this area, which shelters the geometric archaic altar, a couple of bronze animals were also discovered. It is, however, still unclear if they belong to the first phase of the late geometric temple or if they are a bit older. So the excavation and the exploration of Building 15 has just begun, and these were only the preliminary results of the 23 excavation season and of the April 24 pottery study season, and the story, of course, is to be followed. Above Building 15, the geometric archaic temple is built at the very end of the 8th century, and here you can see an image of 2022, and now the full plan as we uncover it in 2023. So thanks to the acquisition of the new plot that we mentioned earlier, we know now that it's an apsidial building of 32 meters long by 8 meters, and its lengths appear to correspond to the symbolic dimension of the 100 feet. The outer walls of Temple 14 are reinforced by posts placed at regular intervals against their internal face and by a central colonnade. The revealing of the western part as well as the eastern part of the building were key results of the campaign 2023. You can see here a few shots. The dry stone walls are very carefully built, and part of the mud brick elevation is still in place. Here a few shots of the post holes. They're very deep and also very well built. Most of the time, the stones holding the post could also be excavated and are still visible. In general, the temple is divided in 3 distinct spaces. A first elongated room, probably covered by a roof, opens out to the east, and the eastern facade is probably marked by a central unique column. The central section, so the room B, is shorter and accessible through an off-center doorway, and the rear building consists of an apsidial room. All 3 rooms within the temple house an altar or a hearth, whose use produced layers of ash, charcoal, charred bones, and limes. the eastern part of the temple, in the eastern part, so the room A, we reached the foundation of the horseshoe altar that we discovered in 2020, asserting that the first phase of this altar is linked to Temple 14. This altar was placed in a covered or semi-covered space and not in front of the building's entrance as we initially thought. In the center, the large hearth that you can see was initially identified thanks to the analysis of the micromorphological samples made above and around it, and then we could excavate it. The structure was reshaped several times, and from what we excavated, it looks like it functioned in a manner comparable to that of the horseshoe altar, which is in room A of Temple 14. The layers around the structure contain also waste from the altar's use, including ashes, charcoal, burnt bones, and offerings, alternating with strata of indurated clay and white lime. And last, in the third room, we identified the remains of a probable third hearth in the back room of the temple. It's a quadrangular structure made of a single layer of stones, and well, it's now partially excavated, but it's also surrounded by layers similar to the other altars we already excavated. So with its plan, Temple 15 closely parallels to Building 2 in the sanctuary of Apollo Daphnephoros at Eretria and becomes part of the group of grand religious buildings of the 8th and the 7th century, like the one in Kalapodi or Samos. The pottery from the geometric period is represented by a lot of cantharoi and some canthariscoi, which was quite unexpected, as there are finds which were there are shapes which were not found in Eretria. Here you can see some examples. So left up a canthariscus, and all other shapes are regular cantharoi, and also some other shapes like cotyli, scyphoi, plates, or hydriscoi. In situ, we were able to excavate 7th layer occupation with objects and pottery laying on the floor level. Here you see 2 shots on the excavation, and here you can see some of the already restored objects. So typical are large cotylae, like the one up left with a large flower, or the one below, a cotylae with added color, white and red, and dot rosettes, or scyphoi. Of course, the very well-known high-neck jugs, which were already present and excavated in the north area, sacrificial area north of the sanctuary of Apollo, excavated by and published by Sandrine Hubert, and a lot of cups or mugs, as you can see on the slide. Some bronze vases of the same shape like the pottery. And for the other objects, we discover, for example, arm bracelet made of boar tusk. This is the first object left up. Some weight made of bronze, a lot of ornaments made of corals, gold, silver, faience, bones, ivory. Quite a lot of seals. You can see one example of the Lyra player group here, and very few figurines. Most of them were faience figurines, as you see here, and one amazing Egyptian ivory head. Almost none of the objects contain inscriptions, but one, which is the bronze mug that I just showed. And we were just able to read the inscription because of, thanks to special photos. The surface is so damaged that it was quite difficult, but it's quite clear that the inscription reads backwards Anethiken, and unfortunately the name before is not visible. And here, still from the 7th century occupation layer, you can see a few examples of the iron objects. So it's comprising as weapons as well as sacrificial tools. Some of them, as you can see on the excavation photo, are bent, which is also the case of the bronze spear down right, which has the two sides which are destroyed, so in a defunctionalizing way. For the 6th century layers, here you can see a few examples. So there are typical cotylae again up left. Quite a few Corinthian imports. Of course, Attic imports. We have quite a lot of Siena cups. And you can see one of the examples here in the center with hoplites on one side and cavalrymen on the other side. And on the right, probably local black figure cotylae. So those all are photos from now, from April. They are working photos, so it's really just fresh. And that's why they're in this state right now. But at one point, you will be able also to enjoy better photos. Still from the 6th century occupation layers, we also have different iron objects, like those spearheads, which are also bent, and other kind of iron tools and various blades. During its long lifetime of about 150 years, Temple 14 has probably been repaired several times, and one of them is attested by tile layers used as leveling and perhaps draining material before the installation of new floor levels. You can see quite well here the example of it, so it's really flattening, leveling, and then the new floor are installed on top of it. And at the end of the 3rd quarter of the 6th century, the temple is destroyed by a fire. This is attested by the layers as well as the burnt pottery. Some of it is still recognizable. You have a few examples here on the slide, but some of it is completely vitrified. You see even that the surface has started to blister, so they were really in the core of the fire without a doubt. Probably the most amazing piece is the one in the center, which is a local black figure plate with an amazing horse facing the viewer. After this destruction, in the last quarter of the 6th century, a new phase is built, so a new building, kind of reusing the walls of the previous building and adding some new walls made of mud bricks, which is creating a plan which looks like that. So the walls were framing the altars on the northern, eastern, and southern part, and they were pierced by 2 entrances on the eastern part. Those settings, as we said already last times, they look temporary to us, for there is no stone foundation supporting them. You can see here a few examples quite well preserved. This one has been destroyed by a Byzantine pit, and this one in the center as well. And this setting remain in place while the foundation of the next temple are placed. So they are placed all around, maybe starting from the south and going up then to the north. And when these are ready, within the mud brick wall structure, the very well known by now offering deposit is placed along the northern wall mainly, and a bit along the eastern wall. And after that, it seems that immediately the construction proceed, and the inside colonnade bays are placed, while and afterwards the entire area is completely backfilled. So this creates a new temple of about 39 meters by 11, of which the architecture is quite difficult to reconstruct, as almost nothing has survived except for its foundation. So small trenches were made in the north and in the south. In the north, with the aim to secure the absence of peristasis, and in the south because we already excavate a part of a pit or a layer containing a lot of blocks from the elevation of the temple, and other elements are scattered throughout the whole sanctuary. So here you can see a hypothetical reconstruction of the derrick entablature made by Jérôme André on the left, and on the right you can see one of the blocks we could recover, so the Gazon block with remains of blue and of red painting. All the layers dating after the end of the 6th century have been erased by later construction or destruction, so we cannot really reconstruct the life of the building after 500. And now, before handing over to Tobias, let me add 2 words about our team. So, as you know already, we are working on the pottery with my colleague Samuel Verdon. Clay analyses are made by Vangelio Kyriazi and Noemi Müller from the Fitch Lab, and micro-residue analyses are now are made by Maria Rumbo, which is now reaching the end of this project. The terracotta figurines are studied by Pauline Maillard, and new members of our team have started now, like Gudrun Klebinda-Gauss, who's studying the ornaments and the bronze finds, Vanessa Boschloss, who's studying the seals, and we also started the technical drawings made by Benoît Pitet. You can see here a very fresh scan of his drawing, which dates of 3 days ago. And you know already, of course, the already member of our team, Bella Dimova, who finished the study of the textile remains, Angelos Gotsinas, who's studying the bone remains, Tatiana Theodoropoulou, who's studying the shells, and Evi Margaritis and Alexei Liadou, who are studying the plant remains. Finally, a few shots of what's happening at the conservation lab. You heard already about it. It's a huge team, and they work with a huge variety of finds, as you could see during the presentation. And they are proceeding very well. I must say that almost not everything, but a large part of the finds are already restored. And the close collaboration with them is bringing much additional knowledge to our study every day on the material, of course, of the object, but also on details on objects that we are otherwise not able to see. So we thank the whole team very warmly. Thank you for your attention, and I now give the floor to Tobias.
Now we'd like to conclude our report on the 2023 excavation of the Amarinthos, lifting our eyes to the hill behind the sanctuary, which makes the setting for the site in its landscape, which is the first place to be inhabited, to be frequented by people arriving at Amarinthos about 3000 BC, and which is the last place to be visited before they leave and abandon the medieval settlement and move inwards, land inwards, upwards the plain. It's also the first site to be explored archaeologically, already by Kourouniotis, and then by the British Archaeological Survey of Evia, where they found the first traces of an important prehistoric settlement. Then excavated by the Greek Antiquities Service, by Miss Parlama, and then Evi Sapuna Sakelaraki in the 70s and late 80s, attesting to the important Bronze Age occupation of the site, which is also attested in the Palace of Thebes in the Linear B archives, mentioning the site already by its name, Amarinthos or Amaruto in Linear B. From our side, so the new Greek-Swiss excavations by the Swiss School of Archaeology in Greece and the Eretrian of Antiquities of Euboea, we opened a few trenches on the western slopes of the hill, attesting again to the important early Bronze Age remains starting in EH1, but also to at least a boundary wall that has been attested in 3 trenches on this slope to Middle Helladic remains further away from the hill, showing that the settlement is even larger than just the hill itself, and the Mycenaean dump at the top, which also shows that much of the Mycenaean settlement has been eroded away before it then has been reoccupied in the medieval times, from which we found many structures, both domestic in nature but also funerary remains. And interestingly, this is really what we have on the hill. There is nothing at all that dates to the period from the sanctuary, and that's also why, well, during the first attempts of finding the sanctuary, it has not been found at Amarinthos. So in all these trenches, we found either Bronze Age and then overlaying directly medieval remains. And that's what we also attest now in the new trenches. So in 2024, we continued our work in 2 trenches at the bottom of the slope as well as at the edge of the top, and we opened a new trench in order to test again the presence of this boundary wall. Now, here at the bottom of the hill, we found again the same sequence of medieval remains overlaying a thick erosion layer and then immediately early Helladic remains. Impressive walls with just one face downwards towards the place where later the sanctuary will be built. Clearly dated to the early Helladic II period, I just want to mention the souspodes that are easily recognizable. Nice stamped pithos rims with a decoration as they are typical for the period. In the trench nearby, that we opened already the year before, we explored below these massive medieval remains, again, early Helladic II walls, one of which is very nicely preserved, but an exact date is hard to prove, as there were mixed layers right down to its bottom, which also attests that some parts, at least, of these early Helladic remains were still visible while the sanctuary was in function down the hill. So by now, we have massive boundary walls of different building phases. In several trenches, we have 2 to 3 different construction phases that go all in the same direction along the western side of the hill. And we are tempted now to put Amarinthos on the map with the fortified settlements of the early Helladic II, of the early Helladic period. And with just this giving a hint, one might be tempted to even talk about bastions as we know them on other sites on the Cyclades, but also on Skyros Island. But I guess that will need further exploration. Further up on the hill, we were able to document the later phases of the Bronze Age, although just with scant remains. We continued the excavation in an exploratory trench to prove the entire stratigraphy of the site, as well as in a grave that we discovered, a grave that dates to the beginning of the Mycenaean period with at least 3 individuals and 2 perfectly preserved vases. In the same trench, there are the few palatial period remains, while the rest, obviously, or as it seems, has been eroded away, unfortunately, during the 2,000 years of abandonment of the hill. And in the deeper trench, we reach by now at least early Helladic III, and it seems to continue as we have not yet reached the natural level. So while the bay and later lagoon that was at the western side of the hill slowly was silted up by the river, the Sarandapotamos, it seems that in the late Helladic IIIC period, after the destruction of the Mycenaean palaces, people moved downwards from the hill into the area where the sanctuary later was built. We just saw in the first part of the reports that now remains are appearing under the temples, and earlier we already reported on remains found under the eastern stoa on the site with a massive, again, late Mycenaean wall. So probably Amarinthos was also one of these sites that were flourishing just after the abandonment of the palaces. in this case probably Thebes, as we are mentioned in the Theban tablets, together with all the other sites, of course, Lefkandi, Pelati, and further up the Euboean Gulf. But I think it's also flourishing now in the local community, the site, and I want to just stop briefly on this, because now, by now, it has become an important reference also in the today's Eretria and Amarinthos region. And this double page in the Typos Eretrias exemplifies the importance of the site now for the community in central Euboea, showing several of the activities we do on site, from an artistic program together with visual artists from Switzerland and Greece, to a presentation on the main square of Amarinthos with hundreds of visitors, to guided tours on the sites, and also certainly my favorite activity, where we had this year about 90 children making important discoveries on the site or on the beach just near to the site. We had not only visual artists, but we also had a collaboration with a Flux laboratory here at Athens, and we had two dancers that followed the excavation and were inspired by the movements of the archaeologists and tried the first choreography together with our students on the site, something that certainly will be followed. Since many years by now, we have developed a program with activities for schools, especially in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, now also translated to German and being used in German-speaking Switzerland. And now, thanks to a grant by the Stavros Niarchos Foundation, we are able to adapt it also to Greek and to the needs of central Euboea. And I'm very happy to report that just in the 3 months now ago, from February to today, and actually we had some tours even today this morning by Cristina Pagoni, who is now responsible for our outreach programs on the site, we had some 650 students and school children that were following our work on the site at Eretria and Amarinthos, but also us visiting their schools from Chalkis to Oliveri in central Euboea. And I guess this picture from the carnival at Amarinthos just shows how now the site and its very recent discoveries have become part of modern Eretria and Amarinthos, with our 2022 limestone statuette now being in life size, being carried through the streets of Amarinthos. Now, for the last part of our report, we want to move from Euboea, from Amarinthos, on the other side of Attica, to Aigina and the Mount Hellanion Oros in the southern part of the island, perfectly visible from here, Lykabetos Hill at Athens, and of course from the ship approaching the island at Aigina. And I'm very happy to report in the name of our team of Stella Chrysoulaki, Leonidas Vokotopoulos, Sofia Michalopoulou, and Jérôme André on our 2023 work on the site, which was not only excavation on the mountaintop, but also survey on the surrounding area. Definitely not an easy task. And here I also would like to thank all the students that participated in this year's work from Switzerland, Greece, Belgium, and the United States. On the mountaintop, we focused our excavation only on the northern part of the top, just downwards the church, where we had discovered in the previous years a late Mycenium wall and a nicely preserved destruction layer from LH 3B2 to LH 3C period, with a few vases that we have shown here a year ago. And if you look then at the stratigraphy, it was promising for the continuation of the excavation on the site. And so we extended our trench on both sides towards the east and the west, and we're now able to uncover completely this building, which is about 3.5 by 4.5 meters, located here on the slope. And we also found the continuation of this deposit, now counting some 30 vases that have not been all entirely restored, but you can see them here already in situ with a larger storage jar, as well as another tripod. And on the western side, a further pithos and other cooking vases. that you also can see here. At least 3 tripods, cooking pots, placed on this rock, maybe some of them fallen out from some shelves here along the wall. Some fragments belong to a vase that we have already found earlier, and that definitely dates the whole deposit into the very beginning of the post-palatial period with this carination that's so typical for Aeginetan production of LH3C cooking pots that we can find in many other locations, but especially, of course, on the nearby islands here with a recent publication from Salamis. And 2 more views. So there are also drinking vases as well as a stone bowl that you can see here as he came out from the soil. This, of course, fits perfectly together, we'd like to say, with the presence of a Cyclopean fortification wall that would then fit towards the picture, to a picture of a fortified refuge settlement at a moment where there was a lot of turmoil and insecurity after the destruction of the palaces, and especially here in the center of the Saroni Gulf. But this will also need further exploration in the years to come. Having a second look at these trenches from 2023, we also continued on the upper part of the trench where we found in previous years more vases of a second deposit, here a dipole of LH3b2, and now in the new excavation season we found further fragments of additional vases that now need to be restored in the same period. All the area was covered with a thick layer containing the ashes and the small, tiny, thousands of fragments of animal bones that come from the sacrifice. Just on top, where there must have been a small temple, an altar dedicated to Zeus in the historic periods. And the bones are now being studied by Angelos Gotsinas. In this layer contains material from the geometric to the Roman period. Now this year we found a larger amount of nice Roman lamps that also attest to activities in this sanctuary of Zeus down to the end of antiquity. In order to understand such an exceptional site, may it be refuge settlement, may it be peak sanctuary, may it be sanctuary of Zeus on the top of the mountain, we also started an intensive survey of the entire landscape around Mount Oros. And although the slopes and the vegetation are definitely difficult to explore, we find pottery from different periods in almost all units. This year we're focusing on the northwestern part of the slopes, as well as several hundred lithic tools at different spots, both here in the northwest, but also in a small plain here, an upland plain that is characterized today by these hundreds of years old olive trees. Furthermore, we could also document several dozens of structures. May these be cisterns, huts, enclosures, but also 2 rock-cut inscriptions, and a quarry here, again, on the northwestern part of the slopes. And as many times, the function of this site on the top might have changed from the Middle Bronze Age, where we have the earliest occupation attested so far, to the medieval, again, refuge settlement that's overlaying these prehistoric and then classical to Roman remains. What is stable is this incredible view from the site towards the Aegean, towards the Saroni Gulf, towards the island, towards Attica and the Peloponnese, and we are looking forward to go back to the site this year in 2024.
Many thanks, Tobias. So as announced, we reached the most important part, the 4th part of our lecture, which is to share a glass of wine all together. So thank you again to the Swiss Embassy for offering the catering tonight. And let's continue, chatting about all this in the garden. Thank you very much for coming. Ευχαριστούμε πολύ.